On Sunday, February 4th, 2018, it was cold but above freezing, and there was heavy rainfall all through the day. That night, it dropped below 25 degrees Fahrenheit and everything froze. Everything from the cars to the road had a sheet of ice covering them. 2:30 a.m. Monday morning, I'm driving on the highway. The Blazer has almost single-handedly got me through the winter, but it's still a bit squirrely on the highway and the tires are just terrible. So I'm driving a little bit slower than normal, somewhere around 55 or 60 miles an hour. And since it is 2:30 in the morning, I am exhausted. Completely out of habit, I move to the left to get onto the HOV bypass lane. The issue is, this lane is an overpass, and after all that rain, it is nothing but a skating rink. Just after it starts to turn, the truck starts to fishtail. It wobbles back and forth for a couple seconds, but it straightens out, and by this time I'm down to about 45 miles an hour. I then hit even more ice at a sharper point of the turn. I try to steer out of it, but the truck isn't having any of it. It goes straight ahead and into the wall. For that fraction of a second, all I see is the headlights aimed directly at the wall, a massive flash of sparks, and then my eyes closed reflexively for probably half a second. When I opened them again, I was still on the road, still rolling forward, and the engine was still running. I was moving at probably 10 miles an hour. I coast down the overpass and park it on the shoulder. Luckily, the seatbelt held me in place, so other than smacking my knee on the steering column, I made it out totally fine. The truck, however, did get rearranged a bit. All the gauges still look good, the engine still sounds fine, so I leave it running and take a look around the car. I don't see any fluids leaking, but that front left corner is pretty smashed up. The headlight's hanging there off, although I plugged the connector in the rest of the way, and the light did still work. It required a little muscle, but I got the hood open and took a look around. I couldn't spot anything other than sheet metal damage. I made sure the fender wasn't actually touching the tire, and then very gingerly drove home. It took to the road without issue, and I got home without hitting any more bad ice. So I parked the car, ice skated across the driveway, and went to sleep. After the sun came up, I took a good long look at the damage. The fender, bumper, and core support are mangled. These parts are done. The headlight lens is broken and the mounting studs are gone. It was actually only hanging on by the connector and the tension spring. The fender is completely bent upwards where the hood meets it. That would be why the hood is having issues. The steel bumper is actually torn and at some parts is scraped almost all the way through. The bumper support brace is damaged, and it looks like it pushed in the frame just a tiny bit. The inner fender is also totaled, but it was so rusted there before it's not much of a loss. Luckily, I don't see any structural damage, and even the body mount pad on the frame still looks perfect, even though the base of the core support is pulling pretty hard sideways on that bolt. Another reason this was lucky is that there's really nothing in the fender on the front left side. The front right has the battery, and chances are that would have been much worse. In the front left, there's the evap canister in the bottom, and then there's nothing else there. So other than that sheet metal damage, it seems I got really lucky and there's really no other damage. An impact like that can be pretty hard on crank bearings and transmission parts, but everything seems to be okay, at least for now. So what's next? I would love to just replace all these parts, but I still need to drive this thing, and even though S10 parts are dirt cheap, I don't really have the money or time to devote to that right now. So we'll do some gentle body work to straighten out the bumper, move the fender away from the tire, and make sure the hood closes properly. For this part, the massage wasn't quite enough, and to ensure tire clearance, I had to do a little bit of surgery. The bumper support brace had been bent far enough that when I bent it back to the proper shape, the tabs on the ends were cracked. For a bit of extra security, once I got the shape right, I welded all the way around both tabs. Then I can bolt the bumper back up so that at least it's solid again. After moving the fender out of the way, I had to reset the bumpers and mess with the height of the hood latch to get everything to close properly. After that work though, it actually opens and closes a bit better than it did before. So now the hood closes, the front end is solid again, and there's nothing endangering the tire. So what about the lights? The plastic headlight trim was gone, and the turn signal lens along with it. And because the area is so damaged, I cannot mount the headlight the way it had been mounted from the factory. So I got a new headlamp and got a little creative mounting things up. I welded washers to the 3 tabs of the headlamp holder and ran bolts through 2 of the holes on the core support and 1 nearby hole that just happened to be on the fender. This worked well enough to get me to the hardware store, where I got some nice long ungraded bolts and was able to tighten them against the frame and then use a nut on each side of the headlamp so that the headlight is still adjustable. I aimed the lights against the garage door and set them up so they're aligned straight ahead and with each other. For the turn signal housing, I went to Harbor Freight and for just a couple bucks got a pair of these trailer marker lights. I gutted one of them and drilled the hole in the back to install the existing turn signal bulb and just zip tied the thing to the headlight bolts. It's not exactly pretty, but at least I have a full set of working lights. So all of that gets the truck back to the point of being drivable, which is where I needed it to be. That concrete wall certainly gave it some extra character, but it's still ticking. Really, everything considered, I got really lucky. I didn't total the truck, and more importantly, I didn't total myself. So I learned a valuable lesson about driving on bad tires, driving on icy overpasses, and maybe even a little about enjoying the little things in every day. I've already learned so much working on this truck, and I'm glad to have it to teach me these lessons as well.